What if I told you there is a Europe you rarely see in the glossy brochures and flashy headlines? A continent of economic power, yes, but also a continent of deep inequalities, hidden hardship, and forgotten voices. Welcome to the poverty map of Europe you were never meant to see. When you think of Europe, what comes to mind? Prosperous economies, social safety nets, high standards of living. But scratch beneath that surface and you'll find something else. Millions of people living at risk, entirely cut off from the story we often hear. In 2023, about 16.2% of the EU population, roughly 71.7 million people, were at risk of poverty. That's not a fringe issue, it's systemic. Zoom into a European map, highlighting regions with high poverty risk, using Eurostat regional data. Here are 10 EU countries where poverty hits hardest, often invisibly and often ignored. These are not always the usual suspects, but together they draw a picture of a Europe that's fractured, unequal, and urgent. The data comes from recent analyses of risk of poverty or social exclusion rates. Here they are, ranked among the top 10 EU countries by poverty risk. Bulgaria, around 30.3% risk. Romania, around 29.7% risk. Greece, around 26.9% risk. Spain, around 25.8% risk. Lithuania, around 25.8% risk. Latvia, around 24.3% risk. Italy, around 23.1% risk. Estonia, around 22.2% risk. Croatia, around 21.7% risk. And Germany, around 21.1% risk. Yes, Germany, the engine of Europe, even it has millions of people pushed to the edges. Let's walk through some of these countries, not just the numbers, but who is behind them, why they matter, and what they reveal about Europe in 2025. Bulgaria. Here, nearly 1 in 3 people lives at risk of poverty. Factors: low wages, limited social protection, and deep structural inequality. In households with children, the situation can be even more precarious. Romania. At 27.9%, the poverty risk is among the highest in the EU. The roots run deep. Limited social transfers, regional disparities, and educational inequality. There's also an intergenerational dimension. People whose parents had low education are disproportionately represented among the impoverished. Greece. With 26.9% at risk, Greece's hardship is both economic and psychological. Shockingly, 66.8% of Greeks saw themselves as subjectively poor in 2024. This isn't just about income, it's about identity, dignity, and hope. Spain stands at 25.8% risk. Children and young people are especially vulnerable. Nearly a third of Spanish minors face poverty or social exclusion. The echoes of the 2008 crisis still resonate: youth unemployment, austerity policies, and a fragile recovery. Lithuania and Latvia. These Baltic states both hover around 24 to 26% risk. In Lithuania, income inequality is particularly sharp. The Gini coefficient was 35.7, one of the highest in the EU. Latvia, too, faces persistent regional and urban-rural divides. Italy. Italy's poverty story is paradoxical. On paper, the country has made gains, but 23.1% still face risk, especially in the south. Despite economic recovery, the poorest Italians aren't benefiting, and absolute poverty has spiked. Add to that the dismantling of key social safety programs such as the citizen's income, and you start to see why this map matters. Estonia, at 22.2%, reveals a sharp tension. Despite being a digital success story, the benefits of wealth aren't evenly shared. Social transfers help, but only so much, especially in rural or older populations. Croatia, 21.7% risk reflects long-standing economic fragility. Here, tourism-driven growth masks deep inequality. Many people outside the tourist hubs struggle with low pay, limited job security, and rising living costs. And Germany, finally, around 21.1% risk. For a country often seen as the powerhouse of Europe, this is a wake-up call. More than 17 million Germans now face social exclusion or poverty. These are not peripheral issues, they're core, systemic. So why does this poverty map look like this? What hides behind the numbers? Here are some key, often overlooked forces. Unequal social transfers and weak welfare systems. In many of these countries, social protection is either underfunded or fails to reach those who need it most. Stagnant wages and precarious labor markets. Even people who work are not immune. The EU reported that in 2024, 8.2% of workers were still at risk of poverty. Education and intergenerational inequality. Low parental education translates to higher poverty risk for the next generation in multiple countries. Urban-rural divide. Poverty regions are often rural or in marginal urban neighborhoods, places that don't make the headline but carry the most weight in maps. Psychological poverty. Subjective poverty is real. Many in these countries don't just lack income, they feel poor, insecure, excluded, worried. If it's so bad in places, why don't we talk about it more? Why is this Europe hidden? Because it clashes with the narrative of European exceptionalism, the idea that Europe is a social utopia, protected by its welfare states. Because poverty isn't just income, it's spatial, generational, emotional. It's not easy to visualize in a 30-second news clip. Because policy responses are fragmented. Regional inequalities don't make for bold, headline-grabbing reforms. And rural poverty doesn't drive national elections like other issues do. Behind every percentage are real people. Consider a parent in Bulgaria juggling 2 part-time jobs, still not making ends meet. A grandparent in rural Romania relying on a fixed, small pension and uncertain if they can afford medicine. A young person in Greece seeing themselves as poor despite working, wondering if they'll ever escape. An Estonian family in the countryside earning decent income, but watching as older generations fall through the cracks. These aren't statistics, they are lives. This poverty map isn't just a problem, it's also a call to action. And there are glimmers of hope. Stronger social policy. Countries like Bulgaria and Romania have made some progress reducing their anchored poverty rates by 2023. Regional investment. The EU's funds could and should be deployed to support low-income regions, especially rural and marginalized communities. Growth inclusive. Job creation is not enough. Work must pay, and safety nets must catch those who fall. Grassroots activism. In many of these countries, civil society is pushing back, demanding better housing, healthcare, and dignity. So what does this map say to us? That Europe's story isn't just one of prosperity? It's also one of exclusion, of hidden crises, of millions waiting in the shadows. When you next think of Europe, its economies, its stability, its unity, don't forget this other side. The poverty map you were never meant to see is not a footnote. It's part of the core narrative. Because the only way to truly build a European future worth believing in is to build one that includes everyone. Thanks for watching. If this video made you rethink what Europe really looks like, hit like, subscribe, and share. And if you want diving deeper into the stories behind these numbers, the families, the regions, the policies, let me know in the comments. Let's keep mapping the truth.